Hey, what's up? I'm Lawrence over at Quasar, and today I'm going to be talking a bit about decentralizing off-chain processes. But actually, in the making of this presentation, I came more to the conclusion that it's actually more about proper dApp development. Uh, so generally, when like you develop your own dApp, you're kind of in this gray space at a certain point, right? Your initial version, your version that maybe you test out on users and users use, that first part, you can completely centralize that. Then there's like this end game part or the app chain thesis, where sure you want to run an app chain and you want to make sure that this app chain is completely decentralized, has like a big validator set and works for everybody. But between there's like a very big gray zone where you're just kind of wondering, okay, so how much do I decentralize? Do I overspend like a madman on validators? Or like what the hell am I even doing? There's already some best practices, I'd say, if you look around people's code and if you actually dive into what other projects are doing for bringing some decentralization to your dApp, making as many actions as you can permissionless, bundling these actions with user actions. Most leverage trading platforms already do this, where you like have price updates, or running your own cron jobs, or having some keeper network like War Protocol running to do your jobs for you. But the problem with permissionless actions in general is that they're quite limited in their scope and what they can actually do for your product. Um, so permissionless actions never generally take in any outside information or take in any complex actions. They always come down to some kind of state update from current on-chain state. But actually, once you start building complex dApps and you start building like a bit more complex work, what you want is access to off-chain data. You really want to have access to maybe historic data. And also you want to do some kind of complex computation over that historic data. But again, if you don't have a validator set, you don't really have the ability to bring any form of decentralization in here, which kind of hampers your ability to experiment with your dApp on a bit larger scale. So if you have like a small tool, you really don't need like 100 or 1,000x the economic security. I don't want to pay $1 million in staked assets so I can try out whether my tool, which already works for 10K, for serving like 10K in dollar value, whether it would work for like 100 or 200K in dollar value. There's really no sense for me to overspend. And I think it's almost like a valley of death, I'd call it, where you end up in Cosmos, where you're paying a lot to bring some decentralization to what you're building, instead of like having the proper effort and time to search for product market fit. So that's my entire goal of my talk, to kind of talk about how we can pay less for decentralization and instead focus on building more. So a small sidetrack here as well. Like restaking is coming out. I think the new meta is going to be people saying restaking won't have any product market fit. I absolutely agree. There's just going to be more supply, less demand, which for us also means that price goes down, which will become more important later on as we talk about scaling your decentralized app from like a little bit decentralized to more decentralized, and just slowly upping your security as your usage increases. So what do we want? So we already talked about the validator set. We don't want to pay for the validator set, but we still want a set of people with validator-like knowledge who have like a relatively high amount of skill and are actually able to do things for us. So we want them to be able to do complicated tasks, right? We want them to understand how to run an indexer. We want them to understand how to keep their indexer running and how to keep continuously submitting things on chain, so we actually have our smart contracts that can do something with them. The computations over these might not be the most lightweight or might not be the easiest, so they need to have some knowledge of how to properly run actual infrastructure. And obviously they have to be able to interact with a blockchain. So if we want to build a system like this, the first thing we in Cosmos generally do is think, oh wait, maybe we should reinvent the wheel here. My general opinion is please don't. Cosmos already has some amazing Lego blocks for us that actually work almost perfectly out of the box in building like your initial set of decentralization features. DAO I think is an amazing example of this. A small fork of DAO, some small additions, or maybe just a different configuration, which seems weird out of the box, already brings you like to a set, like to a bit of infrastructure on any chain you can use to run your validator set over, right? You can have your validators practically be DAO members and post proposals for you. I feel like the graph and like the tools Firehose and Subgraph are highly underutilized. Anytime you talk with somebody about indexing, everybody kind of gets a frown on their face and goes, "Oh yeah, like Cosmos indexing, it's hard to set up. You don't have like a nice indexer which you can easily query running in like a week, 2 weeks." I think the graph is a great tool for just getting something out of the box, schizoing it together in, I don't know, a week, maybe a week and a half before you have actually something up and running on which you can build features that people can use. And then I think for especially the centralization piece, as you further decentralize, Slinky is a great inspiration piece. They already have their SLA module, which provides some knowledge of, okay, so how do you reward people? How do you slash people? They did really well there. And then I think the final part of decentralization here, if you actually do find product market fit with your dev, is like a use of vote extensions. I don't see it as like unrealistic that maybe you build some dep on Osmosis, you have like very low amount of usage, you keep iterating and iterating over your dep, you decentralize a bit more, but in the end you need to kind of completely decentralize. So maybe you throw up like a gov prop saying, hey, I want to decentralize it to the Osmosis validator set, I want to become like a core dep on the Osmosis chain, but it also means I need to be part of like vote extensions, similar to how Slinky is part of vote extensions. So we already use some of these Lego blocks. We built our own vault-based incentives. These are completely computed off-chain. I think between realizing we want to build like a vault-based incentive system which works 100% off-chain and where we just post results on-chain, it took about a week and a half, 2 weeks to get like a first POC out where we could actually start playing around with it, start seeing what kind of infra we need, or like how to build our front end against it. And I think that's the real value here, right? The raw iteration speed that you can have, combined with the fact that you can still decentralize it and still properly decentralize it, is why I think the Lego blocks are great. So again, like we focus on the features and we don't focus on how we get to the features. So, right, this is all very abstract, but we're here for at least somewhat of a tech talk. So I'd much rather talk about how we actually use this to build a product. So I'll talk you guys through what I envision as like a proper roadmap to a minor, we're not going too hard. Let's just start with overhauling the Osmosis incentive system completely. So if you look at the current incentive system, they are hard-coded on-chain. They're kind of set in the rules that they have. They're also on the Cosmos SDK level. I don't think this works too well, in my opinion. So because they're on-chain, and because the rule is set, like your game rules are already out there, and especially incentives is basically a system where you're PvPing against traders. You as a protocol have some kind of behavior you want to incentivize, and have some kind of thing you want to make happen. On the meanwhile, you're paying for that thing to happen, right? For most protocols, it's TVL increase. For some protocols, it's more swap efficiency. Whatever, you have some behavior in mind and you want that behavior to become reality on chain. So fair, we'll pay for fair value, right? We have an idea of like, oh, hey, we'll pay this much to get our ID on chain. Meanwhile, there's a bunch of dudes building their own bots, building their own things, seeing if they can game the system and if they can actually get your payment while bringing less value in than you mean to acquire. Now, because these are hard-coded on-chain and they're on Cosmos SDK level, they're also quite slow to update. I don't think we should be updating them often. Like, we shouldn't be running new incentive iterations every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But that brings us into a weird spot where we see the market react to what we're doing, we see people react to what we're doing, but we're not really able to respond. Obviously, like, they also inflict a load on Osmosis chain, especially now with volume-based incentives. Suddenly we're tracking volume on chain. Well, in the ideal world, we don't even care about the incentives entirely on-chain. We just care that the users claim from the on-chain side. So clearly, like in my opinion, incentives is an on-chain system, which 100% should be off-chain. So let's make up some requirements. We'll keep them relatively simple. We just want to support the GAM module. We want to support the concentrated liquidity module. We want to support volume-based incentives, so for any token X to token Y. We want to support trades if you want to have bidirectional incentives. This just means you create two incentive gauges. We do the same for liquidity-based incentives. I think those are kind of the two main behaviors we want in the world. Right, so we want static liquidity. We want to be able to pay people to be in a certain range of the current tick, but also we want to be able to pay people who specifically come in to serve a specific trade. Well, like I already talked about the toolbox. It's very handy that I chose this subject with like the couple of toolbox items I highlighted, because these are honestly all we need. We need an indexer. We need like an easy to use out of the box indexer to index swap events, any position mutation events. So that's both depositing or withdrawing from the GAM module, or creating a position, moving a position, adding a position in the CL module. As well as any tick crossing events, so we actually realize what tick we're in and which time. Right? Our goal is not to just approximate incentives here. Our goal is to keep the entirety of the incentives perfect and working exactly as they should be. And then I think the last part here is a DAO, so we can actually get the information we compute in our indexer on chain. My first thought here is, okay, let's make it a token-based membership. This is kind of our security we're buying in. If you're distributing 10K via this system, or maybe like 100K in a month, maybe don't buy in 10 million in security. Maybe take it easy there. But as you kind of scale up the system, as it works, as it's proven on mainnet, then obviously you can like expand the amount of members you have, so you have more operators for your system. You can increase the buy-in. There's still some parts missing to a token-based membership. Like there's no slashing, there's no rewards. Rewards
are coming. Slashing is coming.
Yeah. So now we have all these DAO members that theoretically run an indexer for us because they want to participate in proposals, right? They want to vote for correct proposal incentives, and they want to not vote or like vote against incorrect proposals. So we have these DAO members. First, they run an indexer. Over that indexer, they run a query. GraphQL. The graph generally uses GraphQL. So theoretically, your entire incentive gauge can be defined by a single, well-structured, quite complex GraphQL query. So on-chain, they come to an agreement via a proposal, and then upload the incentives to some claiming contracts. So this still isn't a complete system or a well-working system, right? There's still quite a lot to do. But I think if you want to build your own third-party incentive protocol on Osmosis, and you want to try it where there's actual market ask for this, I think this is the way to go. The moment things start to become more complex, I think that's the moment you kind of improve and you build out more features when you realize, oh hey, protocols are actually willing to buy this. So maybe you make claiming Merkle inclusion proof, right? Lower the load on Osmosis chain even more. But making it Merkle inclusion proof requires your DAO members to run API endpoints, which means at this point we need some kind of SLA or something for running these API endpoints. So we already heard rewards are coming and slashing is also coming. I think the only thing really missing then is some kind of on-chain, generalized on-chain coordination of indexed events and queries. We want to be able to update the system. We want to be able to update the system for maybe a cover, maybe a proposal towards like our operators, our DAO members. We can probably do this. I've never tried this, but we can probably do this by just uploading a new GraphQL query on chain and saying forwards on from block X. We're using this new query instead of the old one. I still think there's some infrastructure improvements here needed. I think something like an inherited DAO membership would be really cool. if you actually do achieve product market fit with your product, having like inherited membership would basically mean that you give membership to the validators of a chain. So you've got like your app layer, you've got your COSM layer, which completely runs the incentives, but you still run it on a validator set. And I also think this is the point where it makes sense to throw a gov prop, see if you can get included in vote extensions, because at this point you're basically part of core infrastructure just on the app layer. Also, there needs to be, at this point, there needs to be like a robust slashing system. Slashing systems, in my opinion, are always like quite tricky. They're a bit like, okay, so what do I actually slash? When do I slash? Who comes down to consensus? There's always the question of, okay, but what if there's like a majority bad actors? In general, like they have to be very specific to your use case and very specific to your app depth. So if you are interested in building this, come talk to us over at Quasar. We think a lot about incentives and how we think they should work and how we want them to work. We also use a lot of this technology. I would love for there to be a third-party incentive protocol on Osmosis. I don't think I'm allowed to say anything bearish by Val in the back. It's questionable whether we have enough time to actually build this. I'd love to build this though. We have a lot of people who want to, but we have many things that we want to build. So if you're interested, come talk to us, and maybe we can get you started on building something from which we can like improve Osmosis as a whole. Thanks.